Hi, good evening. Welcome to Tele Lumiere. My name is Denisha LaBranch, and I'm with my brother David LaBranch.
Hello.
So we're taking over for our dad today, so we're really excited. We have some really juicy stuff that we're going to talk about, so we're excited.
Very excited, very excited.
So just to tell you a little bit about ourselves, I'm 28 years old. I went to Bridgewater State University, graduated with a bachelor's degree in criminal justice, and right now I work as an HR business partner for an engineering company.
All right, guess it's my turn. I am 21 years old. I recently just graduated from Fitchburg State University. There I majored in human services and minored in psychological science. At the moment, I'm testing the waters, but I hope to end up working in the school setting as a guidance counselor.
Yeah, and I think that with our majors, it just shows that we have a really strong desire to give back to our community and help those less fortunate than us. So we're really excited to kind of make our mark.
Yes.
So today what we're going to be discussing is actually Juneteenth, so a really important holiday in our history that we celebrated this week. So just to give you guys a little bit of background, Juneteenth commemorates the official ending of slavery. It ended June 19th, 1865. So it was just this past week that we celebrated that, and I know that in Boston, they do a lot of cookouts.
Lots
and
of cookouts,
it's celebrated really heavily in, I think, 45 states?
45 states, yes. A little background on that. So most people learn, they teach in the schools that slavery ended with the Emancipation Proclamation, which was declared by President Abraham Lincoln in 1862, September of 1862. But it was more than just that. It started off with him saying this is no longer okay, but then it had to get voted into Congress, and that did not take place until January of 1865. So there was 3 years of intense debate and argument in order to just, end slavery, just to end it. And like you said, Texas was the last state to, say no to it anymore.
Kind of fall in line.
Fall in line, yes.
No, it's amazing that we've come all this way. But it seems like we still have, some ways to go. But I think it's really, really incredible. And something else that we want to talk about is, even though, again, we've come a long way, we had some other things that came up throughout history, like Jim Crow.
Right, because many people, they don't acknowledge that slavery didn't just end in 1865. There was the Reconstruction era where it was very much learning how to function as what was declared at the time equal people, but it wasn't. Because from 1876 to, I believe, 1965, there was Jim Crow, which pretty much was a movement by the Southern Confederacy that put together the idea of separate but equal.
Right.
Separate public facilities for, Caucasian Americans versus African Americans. And you could see movements like that through Rosa Parks and the bus and refusing to give up her seat, the separate water fountains, bathroom, and typically the things they would give African Americans for public facilities, just restaurants, anything. It was usually of, poor stature, not as up to date. And it's very much, yes, we're no longer slaves, but they're not recognizing us as equal individuals anymore.
So even though there was that idea of separate but equal, it was not so equal.
Not so equal at all.
Yeah. Even when we look at like movies and things that we look at in that 60s time period, there's that movie Hidden Figures where...
Very good movie.
Yes, amazing. I think it won like a lot of rewards too.
A lot of rewards.
Where Taraji P. Henson, the main character, she was working for NASA. And I remember this really iconic scene where every day she was working let's say building A, and she'd have to go to building C, and run to the bathroom. It took her 45 minutes to go there and back.
Just to go to the bathroom?
Just to go to the bathroom. And there was a day that she got caught in the rain. It was a rough day. It was a rough day. And, someone finally asked her, what are you doing? What's taking so long? And she's like, I have to go, 20 minutes out of my way to just use the bathroom because, the bathroom that's closest to us, I'm not allowed to use. And what was really amazing was that finally you saw that her manager at the time kind of went into where it said whites only, and he just knocked it down. And it was like, this bathroom was for everyone. And I think that that was really amazing, that not just with her Taraji in the movie, but, you know, some of those really iconic figures that you mentioned, Rosa Parks, Malcolm X, MLK Jr., it just, even though it was a really difficult time, it showed the resilience of people and what happens when, you know, people are going through a difficult time. You have those strong people that really just stand up.
Yes, it also gives you an idea of the push for education. You know, something else we can talk about is the Brown versus education aspect, where, you know, separate facilities don't necessarily offer equal servitude. And, you know, in Brown versus education, it was very much this African-American child who wanted to go to school in, you know, the white schools because she believed she would be more likely to receive a better education there. And that was a Supreme Court ruling just to go to school.
Right.
You know, it's things like that. But at the same time, you know, the history of Juneteenth and Jim Crow does give birth to the topic of colorism. And you know, the thing about colorism is it's a problem because racism already separates us from race, but colorism separates us internally from different shades of black. You know, within our own culture. Race.
And yeah,
you know,
exactly.
Even in today's society, we see arguments about, you know, the beauty of a fair-skinned individual. In history, the fair-skinned individual was usually fit to serve as a house servant, whereas the darker-skinned individual was more let out for field work and that type of stuff. And I feel that, you know, it does alter societal definition of beauty. And, you know, for African-American little girls, you know, anyone in general, like, what is beautiful shouldn't just be based off a shade of brown.
I agree, and it definitely creates, as you mentioned, disorganization within our own community. And, you know, we were lucky enough, obviously, to have really strong parents.
Very strong parents.
I'm thinking of you, Dad. Really strong parents that, you know, encouraged us to love ourselves and know ourselves and our history. Mm-hmm. But, you know, if you go off of just what you see on TV, then it can be really confusing and difficult, you know, to kind of see where you fit into mainstream beauty. But I think that it just definitely makes us reflect on the fact that, like, okay, Juneteenth, that was 1865. Jim Crow, that was 1960. So it seems like it was so long ago, but it still impacts us very much today, yes. Those kind of like footprints.
You know, it's stepping stones in the right direction over centuries of time. Centuries, not years, centuries.
Right. And so what do you think, David, we can do within our own community to just, you know, support one another and, you know, love each other and be, you know, and not use colorism and these other issues that have kind of been instilled throughout history? How do we combat that? How do we, you know, get over that?
I believe it's not necessarily a question of getting over it. It's a question of learning how to cope while standing together as a united front. I believe education is very important. It's not necessarily what you learn in the school setting, it's what you go out to learn as well. You know, if there's one thing I learned about, one thing I learned about working in the human services major as well as just interning at a school is, you know, the lines behind the curriculum are very, like, direct in the sense where it's just like a school will teach you about, you know, the Emancipation Proclamation, but it won't necessarily teach you, like, you know, the background about it, like, okay, necessarily the 13th Amendment, as well as, you know, the roots of the slavery ending, starting with the slave rebellion in Haiti. That's not something you know, if it wasn't for my parents, mm-hmm. I wouldn't have learned that until I went to college, because that was a college classroom was the first time that topic was ever brought up. Not in elementary school, not in high school, a college classroom.
And I think even beyond that, you know, I think it's really important to research. I think what's amazing now, not so much, you know, a little bit when I was growing up, I'm 28, so I in elementary school I had the internet.
Oh,
Okay, I'm not that
starter,
old.
like dial-up, Jesus.
There was dial-up. I remember, you had to wait like a good, literally dial-up like 10 minutes to get on the internet, and if someone was on the phone, forget it.
Forget it.
But thanks, David. But I think what's really great is in this technology age, it's really a lot simpler to Google and find out, history, not just American history, but, tracing back your roots. So we're Haitian. So like you said, not only like getting our independence, but even beyond that, the Cleopatra eras, the Nefertiti eras, all the queens, just knowing your history, even beyond just, slavery is, I think, really important.
Very much. And it's also realizing that it isn't necessarily what you see on TV. Like, for instance, there was that huge debate of that actress, I'm blanking for the name, the actress that played Cleopatra.
Elizabeth Taylor.
Elizabeth Taylor.
See, now you're showing your age. You should know who Elizabeth Taylor
Oh,
is.
come on.
She was an epic actress. But I do remember that, she was cast to play Cleopatra, and there was a lot of controversy around that because they didn't feel like, even though she was an amazing actress, of course, who doesn't love, White Diamonds, Elizabeth Taylor.
Wow.
Yeah, there was definitely some controversy as to like, was she necessarily
the best,
with her background. But I think that's also an interesting topic of, maybe if we want to see ourselves more represented in the media, we need to have more African American filmmakers and movie directors, and like, for example, Black Panther. That was an amazing movie, and it was all black cast, black director. It made a ton of money. It was like #1 for a few weeks. So I think that that's also a way that we can combat like, what we see in the media. If we want to see more of ourselves, then I think, we should inspire ourselves to take more of those jobs.
It's interesting because the actor who played Black Panther himself, he mentions in, I don't know if you read this, but he did a graduation address. He was a keynote speaker at, I think, Howard University. Yep. Mm-hmm. And he talked about his beginning career in, how he worked in like soap operas, like Days of Our Lives, not specifically Days of Our Lives, but that type of soap opera realm. And he talks about how he would always be cast as, a side role of a thug. And if he wanted to, get a more permanent role, it was very much buying in to being a thug.
Like falling into a stereotype.
A stereotype.
Yeah.
And he mentioned that it was hard for him because he almost felt like he had to sell out in order to make money in the film society. So he was given a position where he was like a side character that came on for a few shows every now and then, but he was given a choice to become a main lead if he fell into this very like stereotypical background. His character would have like a mother who suffers from addiction, a father that's not in the picture. He would have a criminal record. He would, his grammar, especially in the script, wasn't very well either. And he very much felt like it was inappropriate for him to be asked to do so. And when he asked the person who wrote the script, why did you decide to make my character so stereotypical? The person writing the script said, compared to what though? It was very much like he assumed this was African American culture. Even in media, when you look at, our portrayal in the news, on TV, it's very much you see one aspect of it, and it's those who, decide to be involved in crime. Not every black person has a rap sheet, is a stereotype, and I feel that when he said in his graduation speech that I chose to step away from that role because I felt that I could do better for myself, and it would be an injustice to settle in order to make a paycheck. And he did say it was a long journey. There was so many casting and interviews he went to, and he didn't get the roles. But when he landed Black Panther, he felt like all that hard work
paid off.
Amazing.
I think that's a really interesting point because, as we know, there are people that do have really difficult lives. where maybe they do have parents that struggle with addiction, or maybe again they do get involved in crime to support their family because again they feel like that's what's best. So I don't want to discount people with those struggles, but I think a really great way to compensate is to have more positive images of African Americans in all races. It shouldn't just always be, like to your point, a thug or someone involved in crime. And we do see it throughout TV too. I mean, we'll definitely see like doctors and lawyers, and and I think it's important to continue to have really like positive shows. Like growing up for me, it was like Tia Tamera.
Proud Family.
So it's out there. I think that right now reality TV show is really big. And I think that with those, it's all about the drama, right?
It's all about the drama.
It's all about the drama and, craziness. So I think it's also up to us to, if we want to make those changes, then do it, not always like wait for someone else, but to make that change. And also something I thought that was interesting, going back to the actor, it's going to kill me. What is his name?
Which actor?
Chadwick or
Chadwick
we'll
Boseman?
think of it. Is it that?
Chadwick Boseman.
Yes.
I knew the last name, not the first. It was
team, and I knew the first and the last. Teamwork.
It works
Teamwork.
out.
But I remember what he said was that in preparing for his role, he actually did an ancestry, like DNA test, and he traced back to his roots to Africa. So it made him feel really at home with the role. So I think it just definitely goes back to knowing yourself, knowing your history, knowing where you come from, being proud of where you come from, and finding ways that you can make your mark for the next generation and give back to your community. And I definitely, again, think positive imagery is so important. And I think that's what, hopefully we'll do in our careers. And, hopefully if we can inspire, you viewers at home to just be the change that you want to see. I think that would have an amazing impact.
Yes. Let me ask you a question, Denisha. When you tell people you're from Brockton, do you ever get that, Brockton?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah. And you know what I say? City of Champs. Rocky Marciano.
Right on the football field. Right on the football field.
And the stadium right next door. But you know what? I just think that no matter where you come from, whether it's your race, gender, whatever it's going to be, there's going to always be somebody saying something. We know that like bullying is really big in this day and age, or it always has been. I think right now with social media, we're kind of having a little bit more of a conversation, because growing up, I think for us, it was kind of like, it's a part of life, just deal with it, but I think now it's, they're shedding a light a little bit more on it. But I just think that, I keep my head up, and, people are going to say whatever they want, and you can't let that affect you. And, if you can have a smart little comment to say back, that's always good. But I don't think that where you come from really defines your character as a human being. I think that that's a lot more internal than, where you come from, where you went to school. Of course, as you'll find out, David, branding is important when you're looking for jobs.
Yes, I'm young. I'm finding that out now. There have been
definitely
pictures
important,
deleted,
but and I get that, but I think that a lot of those people don't know Brockton. I think they just kind of, hear what they listen to what they see on the news or what they hear, and, it's always the negatives, right? Like, that's what gets the most attention, the negatives, instead of, like, the positives.
Always. I mean, if there's one thing I remember is my transition from Brockton to Fitchburg, completely, like, almost the other side of the state. And, it was very funny because there would be few times where, we would do the openers in the beginning of a class and, like, in the beginning of a semester. And people would go around and say, like, my name, where you're from, this, that, and the third. And would it get to me, I'd be like, obviously, hello, my name is David LeBranche. I'm from Brockton. Brockton? And I'm like, yeah, Brockton High alum,
Yep.
And they're very much like, it's such a dangerous area. I'm like, it's pretty much as dangerous as Fitchburg.
Like, how do you know?
Have you been there? Like, do you just read the post? Do you assume the worst?
Yeah, Yeah, and I think that, you know, a lot of people, they just don't know, like you said, like it's just a lack of knowledge. And I think that it's important for us to always like represent ourselves well, especially if you come from a community that, you know, doesn't always have the best
representation
right, exactly,
in media, yeah.
exactly. You know, so I think it's just important for us to, you know, always, you know, present ourselves well. And, you know, after talking to you, maybe those people at your school, like, oh, well, you know, maybe I, you know, overjudged Brockton. Maybe,
Of course.
you know, because there's good people everywhere, and there's good parts and bad parts of every city.
You know, it doesn't matter how many, like what people don't realize, it doesn't matter how many success stories Brockton has. People would love to focus on the failures.
Exactly. Like I know people in my graduating class that went to like Harvard, MIT,
Same.
you know, and that are doing amazingly. And, you know, hopefully they'll give back to the community. Maybe we'll have them on the show.
Stay tuned.
Stay tuned. But yeah, I think that, you know, we're just going to keep on. Don't let it knock you down. Is really, I think, the best thing that we can say. Is just, you know, persevere. And, you know, what we go through today, I kind of feel like, although we have our bumps, you know, what our ancestors had to go through throughout history. I mean, they really had it difficult, you know. And I think right now we should just keep that in mind and just push through, you know. Don't let the silly comments keep you down.
Speaking of misrepresentation, I think that's a good transition into our next topic.
I think it is.
All right.
So, mass incarceration.
Mass incarceration.
So, I believe the stats are 1 in 17 people in jail. For every one Caucasian, there's 17 African Americans.
Yes, that's correct. And for every one Caucasian, there's 4 Hispanics. It's very sad.
Why do you think that is? Do you think, you know, the media, like we talked about, has something to do with it? Like, what are your thoughts, David?
From my schooling, I did a lot of research into, you know, criminality, like what necessarily makes a criminal, let alone what the police technically look for when they're, you know, arresting and searching neighborhoods. And from what I learned, it's more of, you know, over-policing in urban areas. Like, for instance, a neighborhood like Brockton, constant patrol. It's like you know things are happening, but you're going out of your way to look for things that are happening. Versus in the suburbs, where it's just like it's more of if it's directly reported, then it's acted on. You know. Michelle Alexander, the author of The New Jim Crow, had a very interesting topic of this. She believes that the new Jim Crow is mass incarceration in the sense where the over-policing of urban neighborhoods, as well as the disproportionalism of African Americans and minorities in general, African Americans and minorities in general, males in the prison system, doesn't make sense. She believes that, you know, Caucasians make up the majority of the population.
Right, that's why they're minority.
Why they are the majority.
Brown and, yeah.
Right. But why is the majority of people in jail minorities?
Right.
I know, I just thought that was very interesting.
I definitely think stereotypes definitely play a big part in that as well. So I, again, went to school for criminal justice, and I took a class in policing. So they definitely talk about like what to look for when you're like doing like a stop and frisk or before you decide to like pull someone over. And appearance has a lot to do with it. Now, it's not just about, you know, like the racial background of the person. It's just how they're presenting themselves. I mean, do they look like they're in a kind of like a dirty car? Do they look disheveled? I mean, because those people, they think they you know, could be involved in something like, you know, drugs or alcohol or transporting of narcotics. So how do you think that we can, you know, impact or make an impact on that, or hopefully change that going forward?
Understanding the importance of appearance. Yeah. If there's one thing I was always taught by, you know, our dad, it was that, you know, when put in a situation like that, it's better to be calm, it's better to be compliant, it's better to, just make sure you do what you have to do in order for your safety and just for the sake of the headache,
And obviously don't commit crimes.
And obviously don't commit,
Stay
right,
out of
right.
trouble, do the right
Right.
thing. Don't run stop signs, Yeah, and I agree. But I think that, we've come a long way, but we still have a long way to go, definitely. And I just think that, our ancestors did us a huge favor. They fought wars. They went through, the Jim Crow of, literally, because I think that even though the issues still arise today, it's not as apparent as it used to be, like in the 60s, for example, where it was very blatant. So I think it's definitely up to us.
It's very
and our
indirect.
generation.
It's very indirect.
Yeah, so it's like you notice it, but it's not as in your face, like you said. It's a little more indirect. So I definitely think it's important for us to, take it to the next step. Our ancestors fought the wars, they shed the blood. So I think, through education and representing ourselves well and uplifting each other, is definitely a good way to start.
Let me ask you a question, Denisha. What advice do you give to African American women trying to get into the workforce when compared to your own experiences?
Great question, because I do have to hire. A part of my job is, hiring people, finding talent, promoting people. So I think in general, what I tell anyone is to, just work hard, do what you're supposed to do, and, represent yourself well, and don't let the side comments bother you, just hold your head up high and just do the best that you can. Because, obviously there's definitely a lot of politics that happen in work, A part of the job, I'd say 50% of working in let's say corporate America is actually doing your job, right? That's how you get yourself in the door. That's how you keep your job, is by doing your job. But I also think, just being careful of how you come across to people. And that's not to say that you can't totally be yourself. You should always, find a way to be true to yourself, not to just put up a mask or anything. But just to, maybe keep certain details of your life private and just always remain professional. And just, do the best you can. Be nice to people, and you'll get there.
Follow-up. How do you feel about the angry black woman label?
I think that's exactly what it is. It's just a label, and labels are hurtful.
Exactly.
I think that, anybody can get angry. Any woman of any race or any male can get upset. But I think what that alludes to is more so the challenges that African American women face and how a lot of us get frustrated. So I think that a lot of people take that frustration as angry black woman. But again, it's just a label. It's not something that you have to buy into or feed to. You define yourself.
Exactly.
People can, say whatever they want about me, and I'm not going to say it doesn't hurt. I'm not going to say that, it never affects me, but ultimately I define myself. So if I know that I don't fit into that label, then I'm not going to let it define me. And I think that, others don't let it define you. People are going to want to put you into roles. People are going to want to typecast you. But you just have to pull through and stay strong and show people who you are,
I agree. I feel like part of my struggle with transitioning into the college aspect was just realizing how many minorities weren't there versus, that weren't there in the education process, whether it was professors or just the classroom makeup. There were classes I was the only black person in, and we would talk about things like race and issues.
Whenever they talked about slavery, everyone looked at you
oh my God, are you okay? How is your family personally affected by this? Or when they talk about police brutality, David, have you ever been a victim? What makes you think that's okay to even ask?
Well, I think that it's actually a really interesting question I have for you. So, have you witnessed or dealt with any police brutality, or did you ever feel targeted by police?
Oh yeah, there have been times where I was walking home, maybe from a get together at a certain hour, and there would be a cop that would just stop me mind you, there's other kids, but stopped me specifically and just asked me, "What are you doing?" I'm like, "Walking home to my dorm." He's like, "Okay, let me see your student ID." And I would comply, but I would see him drive by the rest of the kids on the street. And I mean, in that very setting, I'm just like, just do what he says. It's late. I just want to get home. But it's very much like, was it because I was the only minority on the road at that time? Or did I look suspicious? But at the same time, what about my appearance makes me look suspicious? I was dressed normally. I wasn't wearing any gang-affiliated clothing. Clothing. Jeans, a hoodie, nothing out of the ordinary. But what makes me so much of a, yes, we need to talk to this guy type of person? And at the same time, I very much enjoyed my college experience because I put myself in a position to very much come out of my comfort zone. Yeah. I was. You remember when I was younger? I was a little bit.
Yes.
Oh, okay. Okay. Yes, I was introverted, but when I went to college, I very much decided to come out of my shell. I got into leadership positions and roles. One being the vice president of Black Student Union, but it was also getting into Greek life, organizations that are those types of things. And I feel like one of the problems was being sometimes the only minority, and having friends just like, why put yourself in those situations? They'll never understand you. They'll never do this. They'll never do that. You're just a ploy for recruiting. And, at times it certainly did feel that way. There were times I had to, almost give them sensitivity training about certain topics, whether it would be, an African American being like very upset about like a school ruling, or I don't know, just social topics or political issues in the media. And I felt like some people don't realize, like, just because something doesn't affect you personally doesn't mean it isn't a concern.
Right. The famous MLK quote is, an injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. And I definitely agree with you. So what's interesting is, as far as like, police brutality, I personally always get out of tickets.
Okay.
I do, and I'm just always polite and stuff. But obviously, some people lose their lives, and I think that it's important for us to recognize that yes, there are some police officers that don't do the right thing and they do abuse their power, but there's a lot that save lives and make a huge difference and put their lives on the line every day. Like for me going to school, I again sometimes was the only minority, but I think I just said to myself, you know what, like if I can have one positive influence on one of my I'm like blinking right now.
One of your peers,
one of the people I go to school with, then maybe, it can make a difference. Sometimes if you can change one mind or spark, an interest in one person, it can make all the world of difference. And they can tell their friends, and then next thing you know, I do think that we will hopefully get to a place where we don't focus on race so much, because really there's only one race, and that's the human race. So I think, we just have to get back to, treating people with decency and respecting, other human beings, and education as well. Like, so, definitely don't be afraid to be friends with people outside of your comfort zone or in a different background, because, I have plenty of friends in all types of backgrounds, and I learned so much from them and their cultures, and they learn from me. So I think that's the way to do it. It's just
I totally agree. Yeah. I've if there's one thing my major's taught me is, like, regardless of what major, regardless of what background, regardless of anything, there's good and bad people.
Bad people that do bad things.
Bad people that do bad things, and good people who suffer because of the bad people that do bad things, by either labeling or God knows what. I feel that I've become very culturally relative in the sense where I understand that, it's better to be open to knowledge and learning than to just be closed off in your predispositions and opinions.
Right. And I think that you should always be learning, like as long as you're alive.
Never stop learning.
Never stop learning.
Yeah.
Exactly. Like you should always broaden your horizons. Talk to someone you wouldn't talk to. Visit a place that maybe is a little bit out of your comfort zone. Get out there, because the world is a lot smaller than we realize sometimes. And we're all connected, right? We're all here for a reason, and just treating each other well. And you never know, like, who will influence your life down the path. Maybe it was that person that you didn't think too much of is like the next person to give you your opportunity. I know I was. Well, so so yeah, definitely.
I definitely agree. If I remember in school, the only reason I got into Greek life was someone I met during freshman orientation, who completely just out of the blue, just someone I happened to meet while at the bookstore trying to pick up books.
Yeah.
And we sparked a conversation. It was great. It was very like, hey, we like the same things, different places, but we like the same things. And we started hanging out. And he asked me if I wanted to go out for a recruitment event for Greek life, the Sigma Pi fraternity specifically. And I remember at first I was very just like, I don't know about that, you know. But I was very much like, I have nothing to lose. These seem like very nice men. And I went. And there I met someone that I actually decided to make my mentor for the next 4 years of my life. He was someone who I saw myself being a spitting image of my senior year. Same mentality, same parental background. His parents are from Liberia and he's Muslim,
Oh, wow.
but he was just very intuitive, a psychology major. And he had so many big opinions about the world and so many ideas of what he wanted to do to help benefit it. And some of those things I've actually helped partner him with. I actually helped partner with him over side projects, volunteering at soup kitchens, donating books to Ghana, that type of stuff. And it's great. And I would never have met that person if I didn't go out of my comfort zone.
Exactly.
Right.
And I think it's important to realize that, like, in school, you'll see, you'll have the comments, you'll have people that say, some inappropriate things, and that can also happen in the workplace. As HR, I can definitely speak to it where,
Oh boy.
And a lot of it isn't coming from necessarily a bad place. It's just a place of like not knowing, or maybe you're the first person of that background that they have encountered, and so they're trying to get to know you. And again, this isn't just Caucasians. It could be
anyone.
Anyone, right? Like, and you make a little joke, and it's like, oh, maybe that wasn't appropriate. But what do you think are some ways that we can, network better and, get to know people outside of our comfort zone besides like maybe school or work or the bar on Friday night when you've had it? Everyone's your best friend, right? Like after a cocktail or two. Yeah. But yeah, I think it's important for us to come up with ways to, better like network. Because I know when I was going to school, I definitely had a few mentors, a lot of lawyers, and they were from all different backgrounds, and I learned so much from each and every one of them. Ways to, from my Caucasian mentors, they taught me, definitely the importance of appearance and, what to highlight on my resume and, putting me in contact with people that they knew. And from my minority professors, they taught me definitely the importance of researching and always being really well prepared. And definitely, because again, it is difficult because people will have stereotypes and overcoming that. So sometimes you feel like you have to do, twice as good of a job.
Twice as much. We heard that.
Yeah, and that actually, I'm going to flip the page on our little itinerary. That kind of segues into one of our other topics. Yeah.
It's funny we talk about cultural upbringing because, not to speak ill of my dad, but, he didn't play. He was a very, you need to get good grades. The TV is not on weekdays. No phone.
No boys calling the house.
I mean, I'm pretty sure that was just toward you. But, I felt that our father definitely conditioned us to
strive for excellence.
Strive for excellence and just be hard workers, perseverant. It's just, I feel like a lot of people I've encountered, they very much do the woe is me routine. And, granted, they have had hard lives.
And there's challenges out there.
There are challenges out there, but, it makes you stronger. I feel like the best thing to say is just don't let your situation define who you are. Just let it be part of your story.
Let it be part of your story. And, the obstacles that you face, like you said, it definitely makes you stronger. And, think about the sense of pride that you'll get when you overcome those obstacles. If you are someone where every disadvantage was thrown at you, you were, in some ways, you felt like the world or the systems set you up to fail, but you still overcame. Like that's something that is so inspirational. Even for myself, I know that it was a fight for me to get to where I am right now, but I'm definitely, making, like out of people in my age group, probably like the top 20% salary.
Big shoes to fill.
Big shoes to fill. Yeah, dad and mom, but I definitely think a lot of it is how people are brought up, I think sometimes it is definitely challenging to be a certain way when you're surrounded. Again, imagery is so important. If you're surrounded by a lot of people doing the wrong thing, again, not just minorities,
anyone.
How do you basically just overcome that and keep striving for excellence and do amazingly? But there is definitely something that we wanted to touch upon a little bit. This kind of idea of when you're a minority, you almost have to work twice as hard to prove yourself.
Oh, definitely, yes. It's actually interesting you mentioned that because one of the books I read in my last semester of school was this new book by this author, Ta-Nehisi Coates. It's called Between the World and Me. Pretty much, and again, I recommend this book. It's a very heartwarming book. It's very, it gets down to the nitty-gritty topics we don't know really how to express in words, but he does it so beautifully. Pretty much, Coates writes a book in open letter format to his African-American son, pretty much teaching him how to be prepared for the world and the injustices he may face, whether it be police brutality, stereotypes affecting him in the worst workplace and wherever he goes. He explains how his life experiences conditioned his way of parenting his son, all in this book. And one of the things he mentions is definitely the idea of punishment. He believed that, minority parents are so strict on punishing, and whether it be harsh in spanking or in verbal discipline or just taking things away, because he felt that, it's better them discipline their children thoroughly than have the world do it for them.
Well, right, and I definitely understand that, but, as far as my opinion, I don't think that the best way is to, use violence.
Oh, of course, I agree.
I think it teaches, kids or, especially at that age that, if someone angers you or if someone does upset, then you hit them. So, I mean, of course, don't get on me, Haitian parents, right? But I mean, I definitely think that there are ways to prepare your kids, for the world. And in ways they're never going to be prepared. A lot of ways they're just going to have to, see it, and hopefully, you raise them to be, strong enough, obviously, to overcome it. But I think that's just really through education.
No, I agree. He focused on, he didn't just focus on spanking. He did mention just the punishment reward system, whether it be stricter timeouts, stricter taking things away, that type of thing. But he compared it to what he would see amongst his Caucasian counterparts, how it's just it's almost like they had contingency plans for their kids getting in trouble, whether it be a family lawyer or just be, he pretty much made it seem like it wasn't necessarily that the Caucasian parents weren't disciplining their children. They were just more lenient.
Well, see, that's interesting, but I mean, one thing is we don't want people to stereotype us.
Of course.
So we shouldn't stereotype others, and not to take away from that amazing author, because obviously he, did amazing research. But I definitely know,
we all do. Yeah.
Some families where, and we'll say Caucasian in this instance, where they're a little bit more lenient, and then those that are very strict. One of my best friends, her dad was in the military, so he did not play.
Oh, Jesus,
it was very but she's a stronger woman for it.
Of course, yeah.
And vice versa. I definitely know of, let's say African American families where it's very
Discipline.
lenient with the discipline and those that are really strict. So, but I think that a good point that he brought up in that book, I read that myself as well, was that, like you said, they have a little bit more contingency plans, but that comes with money, really. Like,
And
there's that element of it
right.
as well, where, there's this argument that because African Americans, specifically in the U.S., have had to deal with so much, it's like they almost have to play catch up, where they have to build, their families to get to a certain point where, they're able to have like kind of like a family dynasty or business or, money so they can protect their children, protect their families, and give them those extras, because a lot of minorities have to use public defenders. And it's kind of that system where they use the public defenders. Public defenders, they do amazing work, but a lot of them
Multiple
are
cases.
slammed with like sometimes hundreds of cases depending on the district. This is something I learned in school as well. So of course, if you have hundreds of cases, you're not going to be able to give them the level of attention that you would with one or two really high priority cases. So I think a lot of the disparities in the criminal justice system is, not just minorities, but people in general having the money sometimes to buy your freedom, because freedom isn't free, So, I mean, I definitely think that we want to always remain positive and look always towards the future and what we can do, and not always let the negatives drag us down. Mm-hmm. So what are some ways, David, you are planning to impact Brockton or our community? My mic fell.
When I came back to Brockton after graduating, I very much wanted to give back to Brockton High. Brockton High is very underrated in the work they do. I was so much prepared for college when I went to college. I very much liked working with the Upward Bound and Trio programs because, it really does help to have an idea about college and envision it when you actually take tours of the campuses. And,
right.
To have those costs of traveling to, whether it was, UMass Lowell or Salem State University, schools like that, to have that cost comped for you, to have that means to be like, hey, this could be, you if you apply yourself. And especially having that put in your face at a young age, it does make a difference. I was approached by Upward Bound, Talent Church, all those organizations when I was in the 7th grade. And from the 7th grade to the 10th grade, all I did was, learn how to fine-tune my resume, learn how to, be professional in interviews or business meetings, as well as, financial aid programs to look in, like scholarships to apply to. And it very much made me applying for schools as a high school senior not as scary as it was for some of my friends.
That just weren't prepared and didn't go on those tours, or maybe didn't have the money.
Of course, yeah.
To go. And I think something that we talked about a little bit earlier is, again, the disparity of minorities, or the lack thereof, in college campuses. But I think a lot of that goes to money.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I think that, like, in my experience, even though the media and others will tell you a certain tale, I think the only color, if they're one that does matter, is green, which is money. Because when you have that, again, that doesn't mean that your life is going to be a golden pavement and you're never going to have issues. But a lot of the issues that people do face every day, money helps. So I think that, trying to be as successful as possible, at least that's, how I have taken it, to not only better yourself, but better your community, better your family, give
never
back.
Be complacent in your situation.
Right.
Temporary hardships are meant to be temporary. I feel like that's the sad part about some people. It's the complacency in the poverty or the misery that hinders them from moving forward and just making a positive change in their life. There's so many people I've met where it's just like, I grew up poor, I'm gonna die poor. I grew up, messed up, I'm gonna die messed up. It's just like, you're complacent in your misery, you're complacent in your situation. The goal of success is to never settle. It's to always be hungry. It's always to meet the next goal in life. And I feel like, initiating that level of just strive is one of the biggest challenges.
So, like we mentioned, we definitely know of instances and stories where people are really complacent and, they have that mentality. But we also know of a lot of amazing stories where people, rose above their issues in life and
Exceeded all odds.
Exactly, like Oprah, for example. Like she
Oprah.
grew up with a really poor background. She went through a lot of challenging times, and look at where she is today. There's a lot of really influential people today that have had tough backgrounds, and that's what makes their story even more influential. So definitely don't let that stop you.
I agree.
I think that's really what we want to drive home, is just
Definitely.
And help, and don't be afraid to help one another. One thing that I do is I'm actually, through my company, we're going to start doing classes where for people graduating out of school, maybe you want to take one, learn from your big sis.
Right.
Where we definitely not only help with like job placement, whether it's in our company or maybe a sister company, but giving them those interview skills, or maybe not only people with that level of education, but I work with also a lot of blue collar workers as well. Kind of giving them that background, because a lot of people, maybe your success story isn't going to be, a doctor, a lawyer, or an office job. Maybe it's going to be something blue collar, working with your hands. Like, for example, I work with a lot of people like that, and I'm helping them develop their resumes and, interview skills and things like that. Like they can fix compressors and systems, and, I like, if I even have to pick up a wrench, I'm like, wait, what is this? Like, what do I do with it?
Oh, I know. Sorry.
Well, you're not Mr. Fix-It either.
I never said I was. I never said I was. That's why we have our dad. That's why we have our dad.
Good for stuff. Yeah, so we all have our skill sets, but I think that, it's all about finding your path and, what you're going to do to make your mark in this world, and what you're going to do to give back to your community, and what you're going to do to be a positive role model for the up-and-coming generation.
I agree. If there was one thing I really did love about my internship, I actually worked at a school, a charter school, was the ability to inspire young minorities to just think about college, to get involved in Upper Brown, to just be like, hey, visit Fitchburg State, look at their website, see if there's a program you like. If not Fitchburg State, Worcester State. If not Worcester State, the community college. Don't just assume that school isn't for you.
And just because you can't afford it, probably,
right.
Or
there's always going to be a scholarship. There's always going to be a grant. There's always going to be something that, hey, even if you don't get, you're at least qualified to apply for it. And if there's one thing I definitely remember about high school, it was the amount of scholarships I applied for. It was just like everything, like, yep, this applies to me, you're gonna give me some money.
Check.
This applies to me, you're gonna give me some money. And granted, I did get some, not all, sadly, but some. And the little difference it made in helping my parents pay for school was remarkable. It was.
And I think it's definitely important to remember that school is an investment in your future. Like I know, like when I first graduated 6 months out, I'm like, oh, these student loans, like was it really worth it? And like, 5 years later, it definitely was.
Good advice for me,
Good, yeah, it's worth it. Go through it. And to your point, one of the internships I've had, and again, that's what college does for you. It definitely not only broadens your horizons, but will help you find ways to influence other people. So one thing I did was an after-school program I would help with in Boston, where it was troubled youth, youth that would get into, unfortunately, maybe they've had some criminal history issues, or maybe they come from a broken home, and not only just reinforcing college, but reinforcing just like a healthy lifestyle in general, having that balance of, yes, you can go to school, yes, you can have some fun, on the weekends, but making sure that school is a priority, and, obviously safe practices and not doing anything you're not ready for, because, the mistakes that you do make when you're younger definitely have an impact on your future. And that's not to say that you can't rise above it, but I think one thing I always say, especially in my role, in HR and just in general is just set yourself up for success. And, when you're able to do that, if you're able to help someone else, set them up for success. It's really important. And actually, one thing that was really rewarding is after we concluded that program, I've had some of those kids, they stay with you, right? When you work with kids.
They do.
They roll back to me like, thank you, Denisha, like you were a role model for me. Like sometimes it's just great when you see someone that looks like you doing something positive and it
totally
impacts
agree,
you and you're like, you know what, if she can do it, I can do it. Or if he can do it, I can do it.
I agree. We're actually running low on time. Any closing remarks, Denisha?
Yeah, I'd say, again, just be the change that you want to see in the world. Just, love one another. Even if someone isn't always polite to you, I honestly think that I wouldn't have gotten as far in my career if I always took the bait. If I always, whenever someone said something rude to me, I always had to say something. I mean, sometimes it's okay to have a little smart remark, but just being the bigger person, and I definitely believe in karma. So just, always being positive, and if someone is giving you a hard time, maybe they're going through a struggle you don't know about. Just always just being the bigger person, I think, is a long-term payoff. Think of it that way. What about you? Any closing remarks? Your sister's amazing.
Yeah, sure. No, okay, yes, my sister's amazing. If there's one thing I've learned, it's never to settle. There's always going to be a better goal in the future. And, with hard work, anything is possible.
With hard work, anything is definitely possible.
And give back to your community, and don't forget where you came from once you become big and famous or whatever. It definitely does help to, help pave the road that was paved for you.
And attitude, one last thing, attitude is so important, even if you are someone where you've had all the opportunities in the world, or if you're someone who you feel like you've been deprived of opportunities, having a good attitude, and really nobody's owed anything.
Yep.
No matter what race, creed, what religion, whatever it is, you definitely have to earn everything. And just having good attitude and working hard and giving back, for sure.
Well, that's all the time we have for today.
All right, well, thank you so much for joining us, and tune in next time for Tele Lumiere.